Welcome to Nightwhisper. Nightwhisper brings you the darkest tales from the shadows. Join our community. Subscribe, leave a like, and prepare yourself for stories that will haunt your dreams. Story 1. The Man at the Bus Stop. One thing I do recall happening to me 2 years ago in the middle of December. One of the things that have allowed this memory to stay with me this much is because, if I'm honest with myself, this is when I'm ill. Winter flu, when you are literally knocked right out of your feet. I have a fever which will not go below 100 degrees in 2 days, a coughing fit which cracked all of my ribs, and exhaustion in my bones where getting up takes a marathon. Circumstances were not normal, however. I am a film studies major in college, and my name is Maya. I lived in an apartment with a roommate in a suburb just outside of NYC. The total time it took to get to NYC took a total of 40 minutes. One part of this application is most definitely relevant to a search for an apartment. Namely, I did not own a car, in essence, because I simply would not have been able to afford a car on a college budget. The reality of the situation, however, is simply this. I did not need a car because I was being transported exactly where I wanted to go. At any rate, this strategy proved sufficient. Usually, then, of course, there was Professor Harrison talking about filming. A tight but thorough perfectionist with 20 years of experience in Hollywood before he chose to become a teacher. They all thought him impossible to please, but a man famous for knocking doors wide open for students, he chose to impress. He had lent me some very pricey filming equipment for a project that I had chosen to undertake. The Red camera system alone would cost more than a year's tuition without including a primes kit, a pro-grade rig for stabilization, or a wireless follow-focus rig. This is what you have to do, you were supposed to understand. Return it on time or never borrow from him again. And since I knew I would need a letter of recommendation from him when applying to grad school, I simply did not want to go into burning another bridge. The project was due right after winter break, and I promised, nay, swore to have this information returned to him before the end of the semester so he could lend it to another student over winter break. The latest date for this will be the 15th of December. His merchandise will have arrived before 6 p.m. I had a good idea of coming back with it a few days before this, but this virus just sideswiped me like a locomotive. I took whole days just lying in bed and hoping for a quick death. Then, sweating started with a temp of 101, but soon it went up to 102. Briefly, I thought I had a temp of 103 until the medicine kicked in. I had a whole lot of pain, like I got rear-ended by a car. Then, a cough. A ridiculous belly laugh of a cough, where it sounds like I am coughing up lungs right from inside out. I got through 3 boxes of tissue. The roommate moved into a common room just so she can get some sleep and not have to hear all this hacking. By December 15th, I was past the worst of it. No more fever, no longer contagious according to the timeline the urgent care doctor had given me. But I was still weak, still coughing every few seconds, and my voice was basically gone. I sounded like I had been gargling gravel mixed with broken glass. My body felt like it was made of wet sand, heavy and shapeless and exhausted. I tried calling Professor Harrison to explain, to ask for an extension. The phone rang and went to voicemail. I left a message, trying to sound professional despite my ruined voice, explaining that I was sick but would return the equipment as soon as possible. I sent 3 emails, each more desperate than the last. I even tried reaching out through the department secretary. Nothing. The man was notoriously bad at responding to anything that wasn't a face-to-face conversation. He was old school like that, didn't trust electronic communication, thought everything important should be said in person, probably would have preferred if we communicated via telegraph. So I made a decision that, looking back, was probably stupid. But at the time, it felt like my only option. I was going to return that equipment myself. That night, the plan was simple enough. I would take the bus to campus, drop off the equipment at Professor Harrison's office. He had given me the door code for exactly this kind of situation, for late returns and early pickups, and then take the bus back home. Round trip, maybe 2 hours. I could handle 2 hours. I had survived worse. I had pulled all-nighters on less sleep and more caffeine. This would be fine. What I didn't account for was how weak I actually was, or how empty the streets would be on a freezing December night when everyone was either home with family or out at holiday parties. Or the fact that the bus schedule, which was already unreliable on a good day, would become completely chaotic in the cold weather when buses ran slower and drivers took longer breaks. And I definitely didn't account for him. I left my apartment around 7:30 p.m. The sun had already been down for hours. December days are brutally short in this part of the country, full dark by 4:30, and the temperature had dropped to somewhere in the low 20s, the kind of cold that hurts your face, that makes your eyes water, that turns every exhale into a cloud of vapor that hangs in the air like a ghost. I bundled up in my thickest winter coat, the puffy black one that made me look like a marshmallow but kept me warm, pulled on a wool beanie that covered my ears, and wrapped a scarf around my face to protect my damaged throat from the cold air. Then I grabbed the camera bag. The equipment was heavy, probably around 15 pounds with all the padding and protective cases, and carrying it while sick made me feel like I was hauling bricks up a mountain. The walk to the bus stop took about 10 minutes. By the time I got there, I was already exhausted, already regretting this decision, already wondering if I should just turn around and deal with the consequences. My lungs burned from the cold air, and every breath triggered another coughing fit that left me bent over, gasping, tears streaming down my face. I probably looked absolutely pathetic, this small, hunched figure wrapped in an oversized coat, hacking like I had tuberculosis, clutching a heavy bag like my life depended on it. The bus stop was on a main road, but at this hour, on this night, it was completely deserted. No cars passing by, their drivers warm and safe inside. No other people waiting, checking their phones or listening to music. Just me, a metal bench, a flickering streetlight that kept threatening to go out entirely, and the kind of silence that only exists in the suburbs after dark. The type of silence that feels heavy, oppressive, like the world itself is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I checked my phone. The transit app said the next bus would arrive in 12 minutes. I sat down on the bench, the metal cold even through my thick coat, pulled my scarf tighter around my face, and waited. 12 minutes turned into 15. 15 turned into 20. The app kept updating, kept pushing the arrival time back. Bus delayed. Bus rerouted. Next bus in 8 minutes. Then 8 minutes would pass and it would say 15 minutes again. This was typical for our transit system, especially in cold weather when buses ran slower and drivers took longer breaks and mechanical issues became more common. But that didn't make it any less frustrating when I was standing there, sick and freezing and increasingly anxious. Every few seconds, I would lean forward and look down the street, hoping to see headlights approaching. Nothing. Just empty roads stretching into darkness in both directions. Just streetlights making pools of yellow on black asphalt. Just silence and cold, and the growing certainty that I had made a terrible mistake. I had been waiting for almost 30 minutes when the car pulled up. It was a dark sedan. I couldn't tell the exact color in the dim light, maybe black or dark blue or charcoal gray, and it slowed down as it approached the bus stop. Not stopping completely, just reducing speed, like the driver was looking for something. Or someone. My first thought was that someone was going to ask for directions. That happens sometimes. People get lost, they see someone waiting at a bus stop, they pull over and ask how to get to the highway or where the nearest gas station is. Normal stuff. Annoying when you're sick and cold and just want to be left alone, but normal. But the car didn't pull over next to me. It pulled over about 20 feet away, near the corner, its engine idling. I could see shapes moving inside, multiple people, at least 3 or 4, maybe more. They were talking, laughing. speaking in a language I didn't recognize, something with hard consonants and rolled R's. The windows were slightly fogged from the heat inside, from all those bodies and all that breath. Part of me envied them, warm, together, going somewhere, while I sat here alone in the cold. I tried not to stare, tried to focus on my phone, on the app that kept lying to me about when the bus would arrive. But I was aware of them, hyper-aware. When you're a young woman alone at night, you develop this sixth sense about cars that linger too long, about groups of men who pay too much attention. You learn to track them in your peripheral vision, to note details without obviously looking, license plates, makes and models, how many people inside, to plan escape routes without consciously thinking about it. It becomes second nature, instinct, survival programming, written into your nervous system by every news story you've ever read and every warning you've ever received. After a few minutes, the rear passenger door opened and a man got out. He was big. That was the first thing I noticed. Well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and a heavy build that suggested either muscle or weight or both. The kind of build that makes other people look small, that takes up space in a way that feels intentional. He was wearing a dark jacket, jeans, and one of those cloth face masks that had become common during the pandemic, the kind that covers from the bridge of the nose to under the chin, hiding everything but the eyes. Even though restrictions had mostly lifted by then, some people still wore them, for health reasons, for comfort, for warmth in cold weather, for anonymity. I remember thinking it was a little odd, a little out of place, but not alarming. Not yet. The car pulled away as soon as he stepped out, its taillights disappearing around the corner without hesitation, like a drop-off that had been planned. Like they knew exactly where they were going, and he knew exactly where he was staying. The man stood there for a moment, looking around. His eyes, the only part of his face I could see above the mask, scanned the area methodically. The bus stop, the empty street, the closed businesses with their dark windows. Me. Then he started walking toward the bench, toward me. The bus stop had multiple benches. There was one on each side of the shelter, plus a few more along the sidewalk. Plenty of places to sit. Plenty of space to maintain distance, to be polite, to acknowledge that we were strangers sharing a public space, but not obligated to interact. Any normal person would have chosen one of the empty benches, would have kept a respectful distance from the only other person waiting. He sat down right next to me, not on the same bench with space between us. Right next to me, close enough that I could smell cigarette smoke on his jacket, stale and sharp, mixed with something else, cologne maybe, or sweat, or both. Close enough that his thigh almost touched mine. Close enough that I could hear him breathing through the mask, slow and steady, rhythmic in a way that felt deliberate. My heart rate picked up immediately, adrenaline flooding my system, but I told myself to stay calm. Maybe he was just socially awkward, one of those people who don't understand personal space. Maybe he didn't realize how close he was sitting, how uncomfortable it was. Maybe he was waiting for the same bus, and this was the most convenient spot to sit. Maybe there was some innocent explanation I wasn't seeing, some reason that would make all of this make sense. People do weird things sometimes. It doesn't always mean something dangerous. I kept my eyes fixed on my phone, watching the minutes tick by. The app now said the bus would arrive in 6 minutes. 6 minutes. I could handle 6 minutes. I just had to sit here, stay calm, and wait for the bus. Don't make eye contact. Don't engage. Don't give him any reason to talk to you. Just wait. A minute passed. Then 2. I was acutely aware of every breath he took, every small movement he made, the way he shifted his weight, the way his jacket rustled when he moved his arm. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't reading anything. He wasn't doing anything that normal people do while waiting for a bus, checking the time, listening to music, scrolling through social media. Just sitting there, just existing in my space, just breathing. Then I felt something on my shoulder. His arm. He had lifted his arm and wrapped it around my shoulder, pulling me slightly toward him. The grip was firm, not painful, not yet, but not gentle either. Possessive, entitled, like he had every right to touch me, like I was something that belonged to him, like this was completely normal and acceptable behavior with a total stranger at 9 p.m. on a freezing December night. My brain completely short-circuited. I want to explain something about fear because I think a lot of people who haven't experienced something like this don't understand how it actually works. In movies, when something scary happens, people scream. They run. They fight back. They do something heroic and dramatic, something that makes for good entertainment. The music swells. The protagonist takes action. The threat is neutralized in a way that feels satisfying and earned. In real life, at least in my experience, fear doesn't work like that. Real fear is paralysis. Real fear is your brain going completely blank. Every rational thought evaporating like water on a hot stove. Every instinct telling you to freeze because movement might make it worse. Real fear is sitting perfectly still while a stranger's arm tightens around your shoulder because you genuinely don't know what else to do. Because every option seems wrong. Because your body has decided that stillness is survival. Your body locks up. Your voice disappears. You become trapped inside yourself, screaming internally while externally showing nothing. Like being a passenger in your own body, watching from somewhere far away while someone else, or no one, makes the decisions. I don't know how long I sat there frozen. Probably only a few seconds, but it felt like hours. My mind was racing, trying to process what was happening, trying to figure out the right response. Should I scream? There was no one around to hear me. The nearest house was at least 200 feet away, lights off, curtains drawn, probably sleeping or watching TV with the volume up. By the time anyone heard me and came to investigate, this could already be over. One way or another. Should I run? He was twice my size and I was weak from being sick. My lungs could barely handle walking, let alone sprinting. I probably couldn't outrun him on my best day, let alone now. And if I tried to run and failed, if he caught me, what then? Would that make him angry? Would that make everything worse? Should I push him away? What if he got angry? What if he was stronger than I thought, which he almost certainly was? What if he had a weapon, a knife in his pocket, a gun in his waistband, something I couldn't see? What if pushing him away was the thing that turned this from uncomfortable to dangerous? He mumbled something. His voice was low, muffled by the mask, slightly accented in a way I couldn't place. I couldn't make out most of it, the words blurring together, but I caught something like, "Are you okay?" or "You okay?" said in a tone that wasn't really asking, that didn't really care about the answer. I managed to get words out somehow, speaking past the paralysis, past the fear. My voice came out as barely a whisper, rough from coughing, trembling with fear I couldn't hide. "I'm fine. Just waiting for the bus." He didn't respond. He didn't remove his arm. He just sat there, holding me like we were together, like we knew each other, like this was completely normal, like he had every right to be touching me without my permission. My phone buzzed. The app updated, bus arriving in 4 minutes. 4 minutes. I just had to survive 4 minutes. He finally let go after what felt like an eternity, settling back into his seat with a small grunt of effort. I exhaled slowly, trying not to make it obvious that I had been holding my breath. I scooted slightly to my left, putting a few more inches between us, not enough to seem like I was running away, not enough to provoke him, but enough to feel like I could breathe again. Barely. I was already trying to rationalize it. That's what you do when something terrifying happens and you can't escape. You make excuses. You tell yourself stories that make the world make sense again, that let you believe you're safe, that keep the panic at bay. Maybe he thought I looked cold, sitting there shivering in my coat. Maybe he thought I was in distress because I was coughing so much, and this was his misguided way of offering comfort. Maybe it was some kind of cultural thing, and this was how people behaved where he was from. Maybe he was just lonely, just wanted human contact, and didn't understand boundaries. The excuses sounded stupid, even in my own head, paper thin and ridiculous. But I needed them. I needed something to hold on to that wasn't pure terror. 2 more minutes passed. Then, the bus appeared in the distance. When I finally saw those headlights approaching, I felt a wave of relief so intense it almost made me dizzy. Salvation, escape, safety, or at least the promise of it. A metal box full of other people moving towards somewhere else. I stood up quickly, probably too quickly, and grabbed my camera bag. The bus pulled up to the stop, its doors hissing open with that familiar pneumatic sound. I practically lunged toward them, stumbling up the steps, fumbling for my transit card with shaking hands. I stepped onto the bus and immediately moved toward the back, my eyes scanning for the safest spot. There were only a few other passengers, an elderly woman near the front, clutching a shopping bag and staring out the window. A young guy with headphones in the middle, nodding along to music I couldn't hear. A woman with a sleeping child near the back, the kid's head resting against her shoulder. Normal people, safe people, witnesses. I stayed standing, gripping one of the overhead poles, positioning myself near the rear exit. My heart was still racing, but I was already starting to calm down. I was on the bus. I was surrounded by other people. Whatever had happened at the bus stop was over now. Then, he got on the bus. He paid his fare without looking at the driver, without speaking, without any of the small social interactions that normal people perform. Just dropped coins into the machine, waited for the receipt to print, and turned around. His eyes found me immediately, like he had known exactly where I would be standing, like he had been watching me move through the windows while he waited. The bus started moving, pulling away from the stop, but I barely noticed. I was frozen again, paralyzed by the sight of him walking down the aisle. He passed the elderly woman who didn't look up, past the guy with headphones who was lost in his music. He stopped right in front of me. "You should sit," he said. His voice was clearer now that we were inside, sheltered from the wind, but still muffled by the mask. "You look sick." I didn't respond. I couldn't respond. I just shook my head slightly, my hands white-knuckled on the pole, every muscle in my body tense. He sat down in the seat right next to where I was standing. The bus ride to campus was supposed to take about 25 minutes. 25 minutes of this man sitting inches from my legs, close enough to grab me if he wanted to, close enough to follow me when I got off. I had 25 minutes to figure out what to do. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and opened my messages. I needed to tell someone what was happening. I needed someone to know where I was, what was going on, that I might need help. I started typing a message to my roommate, trying to keep my screen angled away from him so he couldn't see what I was writing. "There's a man following me. Got on the bus from the stop. I don't know what to do." I hit send, then opened my location sharing and turned it on. If something happened to me, I wanted someone to know where I was. I wanted there to be a trail. I wanted my last known location to be something other than, "She left the apartment around 7:30 and was never seen again." My roommate responded almost immediately. "What? Are you okay? Should I call the police?" I thought about it. I really did. But what would I tell them? A man sat next to me at a bus stop and got on the same bus. He touched my shoulder. He sat near me. That wasn't illegal. That wasn't even technically threatening, not in any way that would show up on a police report. They would probably tell me I was overreacting, that no crime had been committed, that I should call back if something actually happened. And besides, If I called them, he would hear every word. I don't know, I typed B. He hasn't actually done anything illegal. I'm just scared. Where are you going? Can you get off somewhere safe? That's when the plan started forming in my head. I wasn't going to campus anymore. There was no way I was leading this man to a deserted academic building at night. The film department was in an old building on the edge of campus, isolated from the main buildings, with a parking lot that was always empty after 6 p.m. If I went there, I would be alone with him. Completely alone. No witnesses, no help, no way out. Professor Harrison's equipment could wait. His camera could sit in my bag for another day, another week, forever if necessary. My life was more important than a grade. My life was more important than a recommendation letter. My life was more important than anything I could return to that building. But I needed somewhere safe to go, somewhere public, somewhere with people, somewhere that would still be open at this hour, where I would have witnesses and security and multiple exits and options. That's when I remembered the movie theater. The Grand Meridian Cinema was a big multiplex attached to a shopping center about 3 stops before campus. It was one of those fancy ones with reclining seats and a full bar, the kind of place that charged $15 for popcorn and $20 for a cocktail. I had worked there part-time during my freshman year, running the concession stand and occasionally cleaning theaters between showings. I quit when my course load got too heavy, but 2 of my close friends, Derek and Jenna, still worked there. We had stayed close even after I left. Even though the shopping center closed at 9 p.m., the theater stayed open until midnight for late showings. There would be staff there, walking the halls, checking tickets, cleaning up after customers. There would be customers, at least a few, catching the last shows of the night. There would be security guards patrolling the parking lot in their little golf carts with the yellow lights. More importantly, the theater had a staff entrance in the back, a heavy metal door with a keypad lock hidden from the main parking lot, accessible only to employees. I still remembered the code from when I worked there, 4729*, saved in my notes app, never deleted because I had never thought to. If the code was still the same, if they hadn't changed it in the past 2 years, if I could get to that door before he caught me, I could get inside without him following. I typed quickly to my roommate. Going to the Grand Meridian. My friends work there. Tell Derek I'm coming. Tell him someone is following me. Tell him it's an emergency. On it. Stay safe. Text me when you're inside. I put my phone away and tried to steady my breathing. I had a plan now. I just had to execute it. The bus continued its route, stopping every few minutes to let people on and off. The elderly woman got off at a stop near a senior living center, shuffling down the steps with her shopping bag. The guy with headphones got off near what looked like a bar, disappearing into a crowd of smokers outside. The woman and child got off at a residential area, the kids stirring awake just long enough to stumble down the steps. One by one, the other passengers disappeared until it was just me, the driver behind his plexiglass partition, and him. He hadn't moved. Hadn't said anything else. Just sat there, his body angled slightly toward me, occasionally glancing up at my face with those dark eyes above the mask. Patient eyes, waiting eyes. The eyes of someone who wasn't in any hurry, who had nowhere else to be, who had all the time in the world. 3 stops to the theater, then 2, then 1. The shopping center stop was coming up. I could see the lights of the theater marquee in the distance, glowing red and gold against the dark sky. I moved toward the rear exit, trying to look casual, like I was just a normal passenger getting off at a normal stop. Just a sick college student going to see a movie or meet a friend or do whatever normal people do on December nights. Nothing unusual, nothing to see. The bus slowed. The doors hissed open. I stepped off. He stepped off right behind me. I had known he would. Some part of me had been hoping I was wrong, hoping he would stay on the bus, hoping this was all just coincidence and paranoia and the product of a fever-addled brain. But he was there, right there, close enough that I could hear his breathing, close enough that if I stopped suddenly, he would crash into me. The shopping center stretched out in front of me, a maze of closed storefronts and dim parking lots. Most of the stores had been dark for an hour already. The clothing shops, the electronics store, the restaurants that served lunch crowds, but closed for dinner. Only a few lights remained on here and there, security lights and emergency exit signs, creating pools of weak illumination in an ocean of shadow. The movie theater was on the far side, its marquee lights glowing in the distance like a beacon, like hope, like safety, if I could just get there. I started walking toward it, fast but not running, not yet. I didn't want to trigger a chase, didn't want to let him know I was scared, didn't want to give him any excuse to escalate. Maybe if I stayed calm, maybe if I acted like everything was normal, maybe he would get bored and peel off and this would all be over. I made it about 50 feet before I felt his hand on my shoulder again. This time the grip was tighter, much tighter. His fingers dug in through my coat, through my sweater, pressing against my collarbone hard enough to leave bruises I would find the next day. He pulled me back slightly, slowing me down, forcing me to match his pace. Then, he fell into step beside me, his arm draped over my shoulder like we were old friends, like we were lovers, like I was his. "Where are you going?" he asked. I tried to think of a lie, tried to come up with something that would make him let go, make him back off, make him lose interest. My brain was screaming, drowning in adrenaline, struggling to form coherent thoughts through the panic. "I'm just meeting someone." "Who?" "My boyfriend." The word came out before I could stop it. The classic lie, the one every woman learns to tell at some point, whether we have a boyfriend or not. The magic word that sometimes makes men back off, that signals claimed and protected, and someone will notice if I go missing. "He's waiting for me." "I don't see anyone." "He's inside, at the theater. He's working the late shift. I'm supposed to meet him." The man made a sound that might have been a laugh, or a scoff, or something else entirely, hard to tell with the mask muffling everything. "Okay, I'll walk you." He didn't phrase it as a question, didn't offer or suggest, just stated it like a fact, like a foregone conclusion, like I had no choice in the matter, like my preferences were irrelevant to what was going to happen. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, in my temples, in my fingertips. I kept glancing around, looking for anyone. A security guard, a late-night shopper, a teenager on a skateboard, anyone who could help, anyone who could witness, anyone at all. The parking lot was empty. The stores were dark. A few cars sat in distant spaces, their owners long gone. We might as well have been alone in the world. The theater was getting closer. 200 feet, 150, 100. I could see the front entrance now, the glass doors, the ticket booth with a bored teenager inside, the poster displays advertising movies I would never see. But I couldn't go in that way. If I went through the front, he would follow me inside. He would know exactly where I was. He would be in there with me, in the dark theaters, in the hallways, in the bathroom if I tried to hide. Everywhere I went, he would be right behind me. I needed to get to the staff entrance in the back. "Actually," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady despite every instinct screaming at me, "I need to go around back. That's where he said to meet him, the staff entrance. He's on break." The man made that sound again, that non-laugh. "Okay, I'll walk you." We circled around the side of the building, leaving the lights of the front entrance behind. Away from the windows, away from any chance of being seen from the road. The staff entrance was back here near the dumpsters and loading dock. A concrete area surrounded by privacy fencing, designed to hide the less glamorous parts of theater operation from customers. It was lit by a single security light that cast harsh shadows everywhere, creating stark pools of white against absolute black. It was darker here, much darker than the front, more isolated, more hidden. For a horrible moment, I wondered if I had just made everything worse. If I had just led myself into an even more isolated spot, with no witnesses and no escape. Then I saw them. Derek and Jenna were standing outside the staff entrance, taking a smoke break. Derek was leaning against the wall in his red usher vest, a cigarette in one hand and his phone in the other. Jenna was next to him, also looking at her phone, the screen illuminating her face in the darkness. They hadn't seen me yet. They were just standing there, talking quietly, enjoying the cold air and the break from customers. When they looked up and saw me, their expressions changed immediately. Confusion first, then recognition as they realized who I was, then alarm as they took in the situation, as they saw the man behind me, as they saw his arm around my shoulder, as they saw my face. I made my move. I shoved forward with everything I had, breaking free of his grip with a sudden burst of adrenaline I didn't know I had left. I ran, really ran, faster than I had moved in days, faster than I should have been able to move while sick, my body screaming in protest, my lungs burning, my legs threatening to give out. I sprinted toward the door, toward my friends, toward safety. "Close the door!" I screamed. My voice cracked, barely audible, destroyed by days of coughing. But Derek heard me. His eyes went wide. He threw his cigarette aside and grabbed Jenna's arm, pulling her toward the entrance. The metal door was propped open with a brick. Derek kicked it aside. I crashed into them, practically falling through the doorway as Derek slammed the heavy door shut behind us. Not even 2 seconds later, the door shook. He was trying to get in. The handle rattled violently, like someone was trying to rip it off. Then came the pounding, heavy, rhythmic blows that made the metal door shudder in its frame. Bang, bang, bang. Like he was trying to break through by sheer force, like the door was the only thing standing between him and what he wanted. "What the hell is going on?" Jenna gasped. I couldn't answer. I was bent over, hands on my knees, coughing so hard I thought I might throw up. Stars danced at the edges of my vision. Tears were streaming down my face. I hadn't even realized I was crying. Derek was already on his phone calling security. "Yeah, there's a guy trying to break into the staff entrance. Big guy, dark jacket, face mask covering his face." "No, I don't know who he is. He was following my friend." "Yeah, she's here now. She's safe. She's inside. Please, hurry." The pounding continued for another 30 seconds. 40. Each blow making the door shudder, making the frame creak, making all three of us flinch. Then, abruptly, it stopped. Silence. Through the small, reinforced window in the door, I could see him. He was just standing there now, perfectly still, staring at the door. His eyes, those dark, patient eyes, met mine through the glass. I couldn't see his expression behind the mask, couldn't read his face, couldn't tell what he was thinking. But something about the way he stood, shoulders relaxed, head tilted slightly to one side, completely calm despite what had just happened, was more terrifying than the violence had been. He wasn't angry. He wasn't frustrated. He was just waiting. Then he turned and walked away. Slowly, casually, like he had all the time in the world, like this wasn't over. Security arrived about 5 minutes later, 2 guards in golf carts, looking confused and slightly annoyed at being pulled away from whatever they had been doing. They checked the parking lot, the surrounding area, the delivery entrances of nearby stores. But he was gone, disappeared into the night like he had never been there at all. The police came about an hour after that. 2 officers, a man and a woman, both looking tired and skeptical. They took my statement, asked me questions, made notes on small pads. They asked me to describe him, asked what he had said, asked if I knew him or had ever seen him before. They showed me photos of known offenders in the area, mugshots of men with hard eyes and scarred faces, but none of them matched. I couldn't identify him with any certainty. The mask had covered too much of his face, and honestly, most of my memories were fragmented and fuzzy from panic. The fear had scrambled everything, made it hard to recall details in order. They told me they would increase patrols in the area. They gave me a case number. They said someone would follow up if they found anything. No one ever did. Derek drove me home that night. Jenna sat in the back with me, holding my hand, not saying anything because there was nothing to say. The silence wasn't awkward. It was the silence of people who understood that sometimes words aren't enough. I never found out who that man was. I never found out what he wanted, though I have my suspicions. Dark suspicions that I don't like to think about. Scenarios that play out in my head late at night when I can't sleep. What I do know is this. If Derek and Jenna hadn't been outside at that exact moment, things would have ended differently. If I hadn't remembered the staff entrance, if I hadn't had somewhere to run, if I had been just a few minutes slower or a few steps behind. I try not to think about it too much. But the thoughts come anyway, usually at night, usually when I'm alone. Trust your instincts, always, because sometimes the feeling that something is wrong is the only warning you get. Story 2. The figure in the hallway. This happened in early December, 2 years ago, when I drove up into the mountains to visit an old friend I hadn't seen in a very long time. His name for this story is going to be Michael. I'm using a fake name because honestly, I don't know if he'd want me sharing this. And after everything that happened, I'm not sure I want to be connected to him at all anymore. Some names protect the innocent. This name protects me from whatever he's become. My name is Tyler, and I'm going to tell you about the weekend that made me believe that some people shouldn't be visited and some invitations should never be accepted. Michael and I had been close friends back in high school. We met freshman year when we were assigned to be lab partners in chemistry class, and we just clicked immediately. Same sense of humor, dark, sarcastic, the kind that got us in trouble with teachers. Same taste in movies, horror, thrillers, anything with a twist ending. Same complete disregard for studying until the night before every test, then cramming together until 3 a.m. while surviving on energy drinks and pizza. We would spend entire weekends at each other's houses, playing video games until our eyes burned, eating junk food until we felt sick, talking about everything and nothing. We shared secrets neither of us had told anyone else. We had inside jokes that no one else understood. We planned road trips we would take after graduation, talked about being roommates in college, made promises about being in each other's weddings someday. That's the kind of friends we were. Brothers in everything but blood. The kind of friendship you think will last forever, that nothing could possibly break. But after graduation, things changed the way they always do. I stayed on the East Coast, got a job in advertising in Manhattan, started building something resembling an adult life, apartment with roommates, career with possibilities, student loan payments with no end in sight. The usual stuff. Michael moved out west with his family to some tiny mountain town in Colorado that I'd never heard of and couldn't find on a map without zooming in 3 times. His grandparents had left them a house out there, a big wooden place on the side of a mountain, and his parents wanted to try the whole simple mountain living thing, get away from the city, reconnect with nature, find themselves or whatever people do when they abandon everything familiar. At first, we kept in touch religiously. Texts every few days about nothing in particular, video calls on weekends where we would talk for hours, catching up on our lives, reminiscing about old times, making plans to visit that never quite materialized because of work or money or timing. But over the years, and this is the part that sneaks up on you, those texts became weekly, then monthly, then eventually just birthday messages, and the occasional meme sent without comment, a reminder that we still existed to each other, but not much more. It wasn't intentional. We never had a falling out, never had a fight, never said anything hurtful. Life just got in the way. Distance has a weight to it, a gravity that pulls people apart even when they're trying to hold on. So when Michael reached out to me out of nowhere that November and asked if I wanted to come visit for a weekend in December, I was surprised and excited, honestly. Nostalgic in a way that caught me off guard. It had been almost 5 years since I'd seen him in person. 5 years of photos on social media that showed a man I barely recognized. 5 years of birthday texts that felt increasingly hollow. 5 years of wondering what had happened to my best friend. He told me December was the best time to come because the mountains would be covered in snow and there was something peaceful about the isolation. He said his parents had moved back east after his grandparents passed away. Something about the altitude being too hard on his dad's heart. Michael had stayed behind, said he liked the quiet, said the house needed someone to look after it, said he would love to see me, that it had been too long. I booked the time off work without hesitation, mapped out the drive, packed my bag, and 2 weeks later, I was heading west. The last leg of the journey was the hardest. The mountain roads were narrow and winding, carved into the side of cliffs with drops that made me dizzy to look at. Patches of ice covered the asphalt every few hundred feet, making my tires slip and slide despite my careful driving. Guardrails appeared and disappeared at random, offering protection in some spots and nothing but empty air in others. Every turn felt like a gamble. The sun set around 4 p.m. December days are brutally short at that altitude, and by the time I reached the area where Michael lived, it was already pitch black. My headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating nothing but trees. Endless, identical pine trees pressing in from both sides of the road. Rocks and snow and the occasional reflective sign warning about wildlife crossings. No other cars. No houses with lights on. Nothing that suggested anyone else existed in this part of the world. His house was on the side of the mountain, down a long driveway that I almost missed because there were no lights marking the entrance. No mailbox. No sign. Just a gap in the trees and a dirt road disappearing into blackness. If he hadn't texted me the exact mileage marker to look for, I probably would have driven right past it a dozen times. The driveway was longer than I expected, winding through trees for what felt like a quarter mile before the house finally appeared in my headlights. When I finally pulled up, I felt a weird sense of unease. I couldn't explain. A wrongness that had no obvious source. The house itself wasn't particularly scary. Just an older wooden structure, 2 stories, the kind you see all over mountain communities. A wraparound porch with rocking chairs that looked like they hadn't been used in years, covered in a thin layer of snow. Windows that looked out over the valley below, offering what was probably an incredible view in daylight, but showed nothing now except darkness reflecting my headlights back at me. Normal, almost quaint. The kind of place real estate listings describe as rustic or charming, or a fixer-upper with good bones. But something about it felt wrong, off, like walking into a room and sensing that someone had just left, even though you didn't see them go. Like that feeling you get when you're being watched, except there was no one around to be watching. The house seemed to have a presence to it, an awareness that houses shouldn't have. Michael came out to greet me before I even got out of the car. He was standing on the porch, backlit by the dim yellow light from inside, and for a moment I didn't even recognize him. The Michael I remembered was energetic, always moving, always talking, always filling silence with jokes and observations. This figure on the porch was completely still, standing there like he had been waiting for hours, like he had known exactly when I would arrive. He looked different, thinner than I remembered, much thinner, like he had been sick or hadn't been eating well. His clothes hung off him in ways that made me wonder if he had lost 30 pounds since I last saw him. Paler, too, like someone who spent all their time indoors, who hadn't seen sunlight in months. His hair was longer, messier, hanging past his ears in unwashed tangles. And there was something about his posture, the way he held himself, that seemed wrong. He stood too still. Normal people shift their weight, move their hands, look around. Michael just stood there, motionless, like a mannequin that had been posed on the porch to greet visitors. When he walked down to help me carry my bag, I got a better look at him in the glow of my headlights, and the wrongness intensified. His eyes had this distant quality to them, like he was looking at me, but also looking through me, at something far away that only he could see. Like he wasn't entirely present in this moment, like part of him was somewhere else entirely. And when he spoke, his voice was slower than I remembered, with long pauses between sentences that made me wonder if he'd forgotten what he was saying mid-thought. "Hey, man." Pause. Long pause. "Good." Longer pause. "Good to see you too." That was it. No excitement, no energy, no, "Man, it's been forever," or "I'm so glad you could make it," or any of the things a normal person says when they see their best friend for the first time in 5 years. Just flat, monotone words that barely qualified as conversation. I told myself I was overreacting. I hadn't seen him in 5 years. People change. Maybe living alone in the mountains for this long had made him a little weird, a little socially rusty. Isolation does strange things to people. That would be normal. That would make sense. He helped me carry my bag inside, and I got my first look at the interior of the house. It was warm. There was a fire going in the fireplace, crackling and popping cheerfully. But beyond that, it was almost depressingly sparse. A couch that looked older than I was, sagging in the middle. A coffee table with water rings and scratches and a layer of dust. A couple of mismatched chairs that didn't go together, like they had been collected from different decades. Some antique-looking decorations on the walls, paintings of mountains in heavy frames, a mounted deer head with glass eyes that seemed to follow me. A clock that had stopped at 3:47 and apparently hadn't been fixed. No TV, no computer, no books or magazines, nothing that suggested how someone might spend their time here, what they might do to fill the hours. Just empty space and old furniture and that fire in the fireplace that seemed like the only sign of recent human activity. And across from the couch, a long, dark hallway that led deeper into the house. The hallway was what got me. I know that sounds stupid. It was just a hallway, just a normal part of a normal house. But something about it made my skin crawl. It was long and narrow, with a wooden floor that looked warped in places and white walls that had yellowed with age. A few doors lined it on both sides, all standing open, leading into rooms I couldn't see. And it was completely dark at the far end, no light at all, no window, nothing but absolute blackness. From the couch, it looked like a black rectangular void stretching into the back of the house, a tunnel to nowhere, a mouth waiting to swallow whoever was stupid enough to walk into it. "You can sleep on the couch," Michael said. "It folds out, should be comfortable enough." "That works," I said, trying to shake off the unease. "Where does the hallway go?" He glanced toward it, and something flickered across his face. Something I couldn't read. Fear? Recognition? Warning? It was there and gone so fast I couldn't be sure I'd seen it at all. "Bathrooms back there, and 2 guest rooms. They're empty, though. This was my grandparents' place. And I haven't really used those rooms." "Yeah, you mentioned they passed. Sorry, man. That must have been hard." He shrugged. Not a sad shrug, not a dismissive shrug. Just a shrug. "It is what it is." That first night we talked a little, sat on that old couch with the fire crackling, tried to catch up on 5 years of life, tried to reconnect. I told him about my job, about the city, about the various relationships I'd been in and out of. He listened, or seemed to listen, nodding occasionally, making small sounds of acknowledgement. But he barely shared anything about himself. His answers were vague, non-committal. "It's quiet here. I keep busy. It's fine." The conversation felt stilted, forced, like we were strangers making small talk rather than best friends reuniting. Michael barely made eye contact, and when he did, those eyes were so distant, so empty, that I almost wished he would look away again. And he kept glancing toward the hallway every few minutes, quick little looks, like he was expecting to see something there, like he was checking. Around 10 p.m., he said he was going to bed. "You sure?" I asked. It's still early. We could watch it. I stopped, realizing there was no TV. We could play cards or something. Talk more. I'm tired, he said. And that was it. He went upstairs, his footsteps creaking on the old wood, and I was left alone in the living room, setting up the pull-out couch and trying to convince myself that everything was fine, that this was normal, that 5 years apart could explain everything I was feeling. I left a lamp on near the hallway. I felt stupid about it, like a kid afraid of the dark, like someone who had watched too many horror movies and couldn't separate fiction from reality. But I couldn't bring myself to turn it off. Every time I looked at that black void at the end of the hall, something in my brain screamed at me to look away. Some ancient animal instinct that recognized danger even when my rational mind couldn't explain it. Eventually, exhaustion won, and I fell asleep. I woke up at 2 a.m. to the sound of footsteps. They were coming from upstairs. Heavy, rapid footsteps, like someone sprinting across the floor, back and forth from one end of the room to the other. It sounded frantic, almost panicked, like someone desperately searching for something, or running from something. I lay there frozen, listening, my heart hammering in my chest. The footsteps went on for about 20 seconds. I counted them, trying to stay calm, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Then stopped abruptly. Mid-stride, it seemed like. Complete silence. No door opening, no voices, no explanation. Just nothing. Like someone had hit pause on reality. I waited for something else to happen. Waited for Michael to come downstairs and explain. Waited for any sound at all that would make sense of what I had just heard. A minute passed. 2, 5. Nothing but the wind outside and the settling of the old house. I told myself it was probably just Michael, maybe having a bad dream, maybe sleepwalking. Old houses make weird noises. Floorboards creak. Sound carries strangely through wooden structures. There was probably a perfectly logical explanation for everything I was experiencing. I eventually fell back asleep, but it took a long time. And when I finally drifted off, my dreams were filled with dark hallways and running footsteps and the sense that something was watching me from just out of sight. Waiting. The second day was worse. Michael was acting even stranger than he had the night before. He came downstairs around 10 a.m., moving slowly, almost mechanically, like someone who hadn't slept at all. He barely talked, barely ate. I made breakfast, eggs and toast from supplies I found in his sparse kitchen, and he took 2 bites before pushing his plate away. When I tried to engage him in conversation, asked about his job, his hobbies, whether he'd seen any good movies lately, what he did to fill his days up here, he would respond with one-word answers, his eyes vacant, his attention clearly elsewhere. I noticed him going down the hallway multiple times throughout the day. At first, I assumed he was using the bathroom, but after the 5th or 6th time, I realized I never heard a flush, never heard water running, never heard anything at all. He would just walk down the hall, his footsteps slow and deliberate, disappear into the darkness, stand there for a minute or two in complete silence, and then come back. His face expressionless, his eyes still distant. I thought about asking him what he was doing, but something stopped me. The same instinct that had been telling me something was wrong since I arrived. Some part of me didn't want to know, didn't want him to explain because I was afraid of what the explanation might be. That night, a snowstorm rolled through. The wind was incredible. It slammed against the house hard enough to make the walls shake, hard enough to rattle the windows in their frames, howling like something alive and angry, trying to get inside. I could hear tree branches scraping against the exterior, could feel the cold seeping through every crack and crevice, despite the fire. The world outside had become a white chaos of driving snow and screaming wind. Under other circumstances, I would have loved it. There's something magical about being snowed in, about being cut off from the world in a warm, cozy place while nature rages outside. Cabin vibes, hygge, all that romantic stuff you see in movies and Instagram posts. But there was nothing cozy about this. There was nothing magical. The storm just felt like another layer of isolation, another wall between me and safety. I was trapped here now. Even if I wanted to leave, the roads would be impassable. I was stuck in this house with Michael, whoever Michael had become, until the storm passed. I went to bed early, exhausted from the tension of the day. I didn't leave the lamp on this time. Somehow, the fear had been replaced by a kind of resigned fatalism. Whatever was going to happen was going to happen. A lamp wasn't going to stop it. I fell asleep around midnight. At 2 a.m., I woke up to a different sound, scraping. Soft, rhythmic scraping, like something being dragged slowly across wood. It was coming from the hallway. I could tell that immediately. And it was moving. Slowly, steadily, getting closer. Like something heavy being pulled across the floor. Like something that shouldn't be moving, moving anyway. I lay completely still, my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, every muscle in my body tense. The scraping continued, closer, closer. The sound of something being dragged, something that didn't want to be dragged, something that was resisting. Then it stopped. A moment of absolute silence. The kind of silence that feels louder than any noise, that presses against your eardrums, that makes you hyper-aware of your own heartbeat, your own breathing. I thought maybe I had imagined it. Maybe it was just the wind. Maybe... Tap. A single tap on the wall behind me. Sharp, deliberate, like someone flicking their finger against the wood, like someone letting me know they were there, like someone, or something, saying hello. I turned and looked toward the hallway. It was completely dark. I hadn't left the lamp on, and the fire had died down to embers. I couldn't see anything, just blackness, just that rectangular void I had been trying not to think about. I didn't get up. I didn't investigate. I just rolled over to the other side, pulled the blanket up to my chin, and squeezed my eyes shut. I told myself it was the house settling. Old wood contracts in the cold, pipes make noises. The storm was playing tricks with my senses. I repeated that to myself until I fell asleep again. The third night was when everything fell apart. By this point, I was barely functioning. I hadn't slept more than a few hours over the past 2 nights, and the constant state of unease was wearing me down. My nerves were shot. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow seemed to move. I kept catching Michael staring at me, long, unsettling stares that lasted just a beat too long, where he would look at me without blinking, without expression, like he was studying me, like he was waiting for something, like he knew something I didn't. I started to wonder if coming here had been a mistake, started to wonder if I should just leave, storm or no storm, risk the roads rather than spend another night in this house. But every time I looked out the window, the snow was still falling, the wind was still howling, and I knew I wouldn't make it a mile before I was stuck in a ditch or worse. After dinner, which neither of us really ate, just pushed food around our plates in silence, he went upstairs early again. I stayed on the couch, scrolling through my phone, trying to distract myself from the oppressive atmosphere. The storm was still going, though it had weakened slightly. Snow piled up against the windows, blocking what little moonlight might have come from outside. The world outside the house had ceased to exist. There was only this place, this house, this darkness. I must have dozed off at some point, because the next thing I remember is waking up and not being able to move. Sleep paralysis. I'd heard about it before. That terrifying phenomenon where your brain wakes up, but your body doesn't. Where you're conscious and aware, but completely unable to move. Some people describe it as the most frightening experience of their lives. Some people see things, shadow figures, demons, intruders standing over them while they can't move or scream. I was lying on my back, staring up at the ceiling. My eyes were the only thing I could control, and even that felt like a struggle. Slow, heavy, like moving them through mud. I couldn't speak, couldn't move my fingers, couldn't twitch a muscle. I was trapped inside myself, like being buried alive in my own flesh, and then I saw movement at the end of the hallway. At first, I thought I was imagining it. The darkness was so complete that my eyes could have been playing tricks on me. Shadows forming shapes, anxiety creating monsters, the usual stuff that happens when you wake up terrified in the middle of the night. But as I watched, straining my eyes, the movement became clearer. A shape, a figure, standing at the very end of the hall, just inside the doorway of one of the guest rooms. Not moving into the hallway, not retreating into the room, just standing there. In the threshold, watching. It was Michael. I could see his outline, his silhouette against some faint source of light I couldn't identify. Moonlight through a window maybe, or just my eyes adjusting to the darkness. The shape of his head, his shoulders, his arms hanging at his sides. He was standing completely still, absolutely motionless. Not even the subtle shifting that happens when someone breathes. He was just standing there, watching me. I tried to call out to him, tried to say his name, ask him what he was doing, demand an explanation. But no sound came out. My mouth wouldn't move, my lungs wouldn't cooperate. I was completely helpless, pinned to the bed by invisible chains, while my best friend, or whoever this was wearing his face, watched me from the darkness. He stood there for what felt like an eternity. A minute, maybe two, maybe longer. Time becomes strange when you can't move, when all you can do is watch and wait, when every second stretches into an hour. I couldn't look away, couldn't close my eyes, couldn't do anything except stare at that dark shape in the doorway and pray that it would move, would speak, would do something to break the horrible silence. And then, slowly, he turned. He turned to his right, away from me, and walked into the guest room. He disappeared into the darkness without a sound, like he had been absorbed by it, like the shadows had opened up and swallowed him whole, like he had never been there at all. The paralysis broke gradually. First my fingers. I could wiggle them, just barely. Then, my arms. Then my legs. Then, my ability to breathe normally, to feel my chest rise and fall. When I finally sat up, I was shaking violently, drenched in cold sweat despite the chill in the room. I sat there for a long moment, trying to convince myself that it had been a dream. A hallucination. Sleep paralysis can cause that. I knew that from things I had read online, from stories people told. Your brain conjures things that aren't there, pulls figures from your subconscious and projects them onto reality. It was probably nothing. Probably just my imagination. Probably just fear and exhaustion and isolation combining to create something that wasn't real. Except I couldn't shake the feeling that it was real. That Michael had really been standing there, watching me sleep. I made myself get up. I had to know. I walked toward the hallway on legs that felt like they might give out at any moment, like they were made of jelly, like they didn't belong to me anymore. The darkness ahead was absolute, and I had to feel my way along the wall, my fingertips tracing over cold wood and old wallpaper. Each step felt like a mile. Each breath felt like my last. The guest room was at the very end of the hallway. The door was open, just as it had been since I arrived. I stepped inside. At first, I thought the room was empty. The moonlight filtering through the window, faint, diffused by clouds and snow, provided just enough illumination to make out the basic shapes. A bare mattress frame, old metal, rusted springs showing through. An empty dresser with a cracked mirror. Curtains that had been torn or rotted away, hanging in sad strips. And then I saw it. In the far corner, by the window, There was a person. They were standing with their back to me, facing the glass, completely motionless. Just standing there, looking out at the storm, at the snow, at the darkness beyond. I couldn't tell if it was Michael or not. Couldn't see their face, couldn't make out any details in the dim light. But I could tell they were real. They were solid. They were there. Not a dream, not a hallucination. A person standing in this empty room at 2 a.m., and I had no idea who they were or how long they had been there. I didn't say anything. I didn't approach. I just slowly, carefully backed out of the room, my eyes fixed on that figure, waiting for it to turn around, waiting for it to move, waiting for something horrible to happen. But it just stood there, frozen, like a statue, like someone had paused time in that room. I retreated down the hallway as quietly as I could. I went upstairs. Michael's bedroom door was closed. I pounded on it, not caring anymore about being quiet, not caring about anything except getting answers. After a long moment, long enough that I started to wonder if he was even in there, I heard movement inside. Footsteps. The door opened. Michael was standing there in his pajamas, looking groggy and confused, like he had been deeply asleep and I had just rudely awakened him. His eyes were unfocused, his hair messy, everything about him suggesting that he had been unconscious for hours. "Someone's in the house," I said. My voice was shaking, cracking, barely recognizable as my own. "There's someone standing in the guest room downstairs." His expression changed. The grogginess melted away, replaced by something else entirely. Something I couldn't identify. Not surprise, not fear exactly. More like resignation, like confirmation of something he had already known. "I need you to come downstairs with me," I said. "I need you to see this." He shook his head. Slowly, firmly, like he had already made this decision long ago. "Michael, please, there's someone in your house." "I'm not going down there." "Why not? Michael, what the hell is going on?" He didn't answer. He just looked at me with those distant, empty eyes, and for a moment, I thought I saw something flicker behind them. Something like fear. Something like acceptance. Something like the look of a man who has made peace with something terrible. I asked him directly, forcing the words out. "Michael, who's that downstairs?" He shrugged his shoulders. That was it. A shrug. Like I had asked him what he wanted for dinner, not about the unknown figure standing in his guest room at 2 a.m. I was done. I ran downstairs, grabbed my bag, threw whatever I could find into it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely zip it closed. I kept glancing toward the hallway, expecting to see that figure emerge, expecting something horrible to happen. But the house was quiet. Too quiet, like it was holding its breath. I got outside as fast as I could. The cold air hit me like a physical force, 20 below, maybe colder. But I didn't care. I didn't care about the snow, the ice, the dark, the roads. I just wanted out. I just wanted away from this house, away from Michael, away from whatever was happening here. I brushed snow off my car with my bare hands, my fingers going numb almost immediately. Got inside, started the engine, blasted the heat. As I backed out of the driveway, fighting to keep the car from sliding on the ice, I made the mistake of looking up at the house one last time. In the window of the guest room, that same window I had seen the figure standing in front of, there was a silhouette. Someone standing there watching me leave, dark against the faint light. Perfectly still. I don't know who it was. I don't know what it was. I hit the gas and didn't look back. After that weekend, Michael stopped responding to my texts. I sent him dozens, asking if he was okay, asking what I had seen, demanding answers, begging for any kind of explanation. Nothing. Just silence. I got worried, really worried. I threatened to call the police, to request a wellness check, to drive back up there myself if I had to. Finally, after 3 weeks, he responded. 2 words. I'm fine. That was it. No explanation, no apology, no acknowledgement of anything that had happened. I tried texting him a few more times after that, but he never responded again. Eventually, I stopped trying. That was 2 years ago. I haven't heard from Michael since. I have no idea if he's still living in that house, still walking down that dark hallway, still standing in empty rooms in the middle of the night. I have no idea what I saw, or who that figure was, or why Michael refused to explain any of it. What I do know is this. Michael is not the same person I knew in high school. Something happened to him up there in those mountains. Something that changed him. Something that broke him in ways I can't understand. And whoever, or whatever, was in that house with him. That's a mystery I'm not sure I want solved. Some invitations should never be accepted. Some friends are better left in the past, and some questions are better left unanswered.